If you're a nerd for like super ultra JDM rare AE86 factory option stuff like me, you might appreciate this video. A while ago, I bought a bunch of parts in bulk, and some of those parts included things like this. A JDM digital cluster for an AE86. Now this never came in US vehicles. It was JDM market only, and I think anything that was right-hand drive had the option of having this, but no US vehicles got that as a factory option. All we had was the analog clusters, which are still pretty rad, but I just love the look of this digital cluster. I've wanted to put one in a car for a really long time, and finally I had the opportunity to do so. Now that I've got it, I've got all the parts I need to be able to put it in. Let's walk through what you need to convert your AE86 to a digital cluster. So first and foremost, you'll obviously need the digital cluster. Now, when you buy your digital cluster, you need to make sure you get the connector pigtails with it. That's these two guys right here. It's because they're much different than the factory connectors from the US. This is a jumper harness that came with mine, so you need the pigtails from the JDM digital cluster so you can make a jumper harness. And what you do to make this, you take the digital cluster connectors and then you're going to chop off these little bits from your analog cluster as well as these clips or these bits of the housing. That way you can get connectors like this guy to clip into it. The other option is you can also just chop off your US connectors and solder in or crimp in, how you're going to do it, the digital cluster connectors. I'll put a link down below to my website where I've got a wiring diagram guide that's been used in the forums for over the years of how to do this conversion. Another major part of the conversion is getting the proper fuel level sender because it's different for the digital versus analog. So you can typically tell that it's a digital cluster sender because of the blue top. This one's a little rough looking, but these aren't available new anymore, so you have to buy used ones, which is why this one looks a little rough. I've had it sit in the garage for a long time. The other part that you're going to need that I don't have right now is the engine oil pressure sensor, because it's a different sensor, once again, for this cluster versus the US cluster. But that one I think is pretty readily available. It's just the biggest thing is just that the fuel level sender is discontinued. All right, so that's all the pieces you need. All right, now let's go look at the car because there are some things you actually have to modify under the dash to make clearance for it. Essentially, the dash attaches to the vehicle right there behind the cluster using two studs that stick down and then you put some nuts on it. Well, the problem with those studs is that one of them interferes with the cluster. You see, one of them sits down lower versus the other one's higher. And on, say, a JDM vehicle, right-hand drive vehicle, those will be opposite. And so on the cluster, there's a cutout for the lower stud, but we don't have that, it's not on the right side because this is a cluster meant for right-hand drive and not left-hand drive. So they're opposite. But let's go look at the car and I'll show you what I mean.
This is the stud I'm talking about. You can see this one hangs down lower. Oop. See, that one hangs down lower than that one. And if you look at the back of the cluster, so this is right-hand drive, right? So you can see this side, it's significantly lower. It's level with the tab, whereas this one, it is not. So if this were going on a right-hand drive vehicle, it would have the cutout for that lower stud that we just don't have on a left-hand drive vehicle. So that's the stud that you've got to trim right there. Now, I don't know if you can trim that with the dash in the car. I have to pull the dash to do some wiring stuff, so I'm gonna go ahead and yank it out and then trim or remove that stud completely depending on how much clearance I need. So that stud, I just removed it. You can see it's got a little hex on top of it. So if you've got a little itty bitty socket or wrench, you can get on there and remove it. So I did that and it's still really tight. So I think on this, like the little sheet metal trim back there where this bolts to, you might actually need to pry it up a little bit to make room for it because it's very, very tight, where on this side there's actually a little bit more of a cutout. So just a heads up, that's just something you might run into like I did on mine. And I think that's the issue. Is I know I had some stuff a little bent in there, so you might have to just bend it up a little bit with whatever tools you've got, and then you should be able to bolt it in. And you can see that it really doesn't like to fit. It's really tight, pretty much all the way up against the dash up there at the top. So, okay, with that stud removed, we can get the cluster in, but you can see it's a really, really tight fit, and actually this metal bar way back there that the dash bolts to, right? That guy, mine was down a little bit, and so you can see, like, when I put it in there, it like wedged in a little bit, and so the top of the cluster is actually contacting that. So that's not necessarily ideal. If you can, I would probably pull the whole dash and hammer it up on this side. That bit right there along this side of the cluster, probably from here to here. That way you don't have it contacting anything. I'm gonna go ahead and attach the jumper harness to the cluster. Now, the one thing as I was looking at this going, oh crap, they both look exactly the same. How I'm gonna make sure that I get these connected to the right spots here is I look at the wiring. So I see that we've got wires on both far ends here of this connector, and the blue connector doesn't have pins there. So I know that these two are gonna go to the white connector here. So that's what I'm gonna go ahead and plug it into. Okay, that guy's all the way in. Now we gotta do the other side. I also wanna point out, I didn't make this jumper harness, so some of the modifications here might be a little different than what you would expect to see on something that I built. But it works, so I really can't complain too much because I have tested it before when I was trying to get everything in, and the car about caught on fire because I had the wrong wiring. Okay, there we go. Jumper harness connected. Now we can go ahead and run this over and plug it in. There we go. Now, obviously you're gonna have to know how to take all this apart to get to the cluster, so sorry I didn't walk you through that. You gotta drop the steering column down, you've gotta drop the little piece that goes underneath here, you've gotta drop the trim piece here, and then pull out the cluster surround. So there's a little bit to it, but if you're familiar with taking apart the interior of an AE86 or really any car, it should be pretty straightforward. All right, here's the moment of truth. The new wiring harness is in. We've got the cluster connected. What happens when we turn the key on? Yay! Everything powers up, and we've got no smoke. That's very exciting. Now for the next bit of the install. We're gonna put the level sender in the car. You're gonna find the level sender is hidden underneath this cover here in the trunk of the car. I have a new billet JSP fab one to install, so I'm just gonna set this one aside. It's just held in place by 3 screws, 1, 2, 3, really easy to remove them. Make sure you don't lose your fuel pump wiring in the process of this, because sometimes it'll fall back under to a place that you can't get it to, like that. See? The level sender is held in place by 5 Phillips head screws, so just be careful when you're doing this that you don't strip the heads, because you know, they are old. Now we'll pull the old sender out. Oh. And we'll put the new one in. You're going to want to tighten these in several passes and make sure to go back around and tighten them, because it's a rubber seal. It's a gasket that you want to make sure isn't going to leak fuel out the top. And tighten them in a star pattern, just like you do with wheels. Luckily, the connector on the car is the exact same, so you just plug it in. And that's pretty much what you need to do to install a digital cluster in your USDM AE86. Now, this has been a part of my Project Cream Puff AE86 Resto Mod. It's an 11 front end conversion, brand new, CBY bumper, run free fenders, and my favorite part, well, not the trash bag, Beams 3SGE with panic made ITBs, sitting on annex coilovers, and a bunch of Just Engineering suspension bits.
If you like this video about Project Cream Puff, you should check out the other videos about Project Cream Puff because this car has a lot of sweet bits and pieces in it. I'm really pulling out all the stop of this build. So like, comment, subscribe, share. Thanks, guys.